Welcome to One Brooklyn, presented by Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams.
How are you?
On this edition of One Brooklyn, Brooklyn Borough President Adams joined an array of parks advocates in Highland Park, which straddles the Brooklyn-Queens border and is home to the newly nationally recognized Ridgewood Reservoir. There, he unveiled the findings of a year-long analysis called Pulse of Our Parks.
Well, we went out and looked at 270 parks in the borough, those that were a half acre or more, and we did an analysis to look at access to water, access to a comfort station, Wi-Fi, and friends of groups. All of these items we found are important entities to ensure a healthy park and a healthy green space. One thing we must do is look at funding our parks and stop viewing parks as the first items on the cutting block and believe that they're just a luxury. No, in fact, they're a necessity. These parks are the Bermudas and the beautiful vacation resort for those who cannot afford to fly away. This is where families come together and to convene and have safe spaces for their family. And it's a great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you are a multimillionaire or if you're a person trying to find employment. This ensures that we come together and not only cross-pollinate with flowers, but cross-pollinate in communities and culture and create a healthy environment.
Borough President Adams held a press conference emphasizing the importance of protecting Brooklyn's green spaces and enhancing them with amenities that improve accessibility for all.
I really want to thank our team, my team here at Borough Hall, for really putting this together. It was a very serious undertaking as you look at the number of parks we have in the borough. And I want to thank all of our partners as well. The Cadman Park Conservancy, New Yorkers for Parks, Brooklyn Bridge Park, Friends of Wingate Park, and Friends of St. John's Park, and particularly our volunteers, Afropunk. This was an organization that would go out and actually young people who volunteer, and they will go out and count the parks and the inventory that we put in place. As you know, that green and recreational space is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter what is your economic status, if you're employed or unemployed. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you may be. It clearly states that green space is made for all Brooklynites and all New Yorkers. And if there's ever a place that we should invest in our parks, because it gives us an opportunity to cross-pollinate not only flowers, but cross-pollinate communities and ethnicities and allow people to come together under one umbrella as they experience the experience of a park. We believe that more than a tree should grow in Brooklyn, our parks should grow in Brooklyn. And you don't have to have a great deal of green dollars to see green space and open space where you can come together and realize the beauty of being in a park and what it represents. And so I'm proud to be here at Highland Park in Cypress Hill, right on the Brooklyn-Queens border, in front of the Ridgewood Reservoir that has a very rich history. This 50-acre body of water began operating in 1858 and supplied water to the borough of Brooklyn from 1959 up until 1959, and it helped Brooklyn become the third largest city in America, overtaking Chicago. Although it was decommissioned in the 80s, the reservoir once held 300 million gallons of water, making Brooklyn into a booming city that we are experiencing today. So it was all about a park. It was all about a water space where we could continue to grow as a borough. It remains home for cardinals and over 150 other species of birds. We sometimes think of parks, we only think about the human interaction, but it is also a place where animals come, and it is the closest they can get to an actual nature environment. This beautiful backdrop, I'm proud to announce this great Pulse of Our Parks report. And it took a year long to do this report with our volunteers and our partners. Some of them we will hear from later. They were part of this great initiative. We looked at parks that had 1/2 acre in size. It was our goal to have an equalizer. We have so many parks in the borough, but we wanted to make sure that we use a scale that would be equivalent to the use in the park. The size requirement was selected to ensure that the survey was capturing data around most active parks in the borough. And we define active parks as usually larger and host activities and programming. Passive parks usually have fewer amenities, allowing visitors to a quiet place to relax, just as important, but we want to focus our attention on larger parks. The 1/2 acre benchmark was used in order to filter out smaller passive parks and to ensure as close to an equitable comparison as possible. And so some of the things that we looked at to determine and to weigh on was: 1, access to fresh water for consumption; 2, existence of Friends of Groups, a nonprofit partner organization or programming within the park. We found this to be very important. 3, existence of public available Wi-Fi on park premises. This was a very significant gauge for us, because many people go to the parks to use their smartphones, their smart devices. And 5, support for a multitude of activity uses within the park: playgrounds, sports equipment, courts, and other type of activity. The results were compiled and analyzed through a color-coded leaf system, as you see here on the billboards that's next to us, with parks able to garner a total of 6 leaves, with each leaf color indicating a specific area of measurement. This analysis was conducted over a year-long period, as I stated, with many volunteers, including my staff, that visited all of the parks that are a 1/2 acre in size or more. And it's important to note that we went out and actually physically looked at these parks. It was a labor of love, and we looked at things such as information to identify parks program. We spoke with different friends groups and organizations, a list of Brooklyn parks that came from the New York City park staff. So many people participated in this final product. We use our legal fellows as well at my office to review data to ensure accuracy. Our assessment found that 11% of the parks did not have access to drinking fountain. 81% had more than one active use, which was a good thing. 40% lacked comfort stations. Only 27% of parks were affiliated with a nonprofit organization or youth group or organization or formal community group. So only a quarter of our parks had Friends of, such as Friends of Prospect Park, Friends of Wingate Park, but the remaining of our parks did not have Friends of groups, which was extremely disappointing. And even further disappointment laid at the fact that only 12% had access to public available Wi-Fi, far below what is necessary for residents in the 21st century, where so many people are using smart devices. The report has 4 key areas for recommendation, including community engagement. We want to encourage more community engagement, funding, land use purview, and technology investment. We have to invest in our technology and our infrastructure as well. In the community engagement aspect, we're calling for greater involvement of community members in the day-to-day care of their local parks, and we want to use, as Sue just joined us from Prospect Park Alliance, we want to use Prospect Park Alliance as an example of what we believe that partnership and that engagement can create to help in some of the development and interaction in the park. We're also calling for the expansion of friends of groups. These are groups that are around the park or in the vicinity or great use of the park, to let them have a participation in the development of the park. In Borough Hall, we do a biannual meeting that we convene the Friends of groups to develop a strategy for improving the parks across Brooklyn. And in fact, we're going to have that meeting on April 16th from 5 to 9 p.m. in the courtroom at Borough Hall. And we're encouraging people to come out learning about how to develop a Friends of group and how do we continue to support the Friends of group. We're also calling for New York City parks to expand free Wi-Fi access to all parks. We believe there should be a partnership between community, corporate, and business partnership. Wi-Fi is so important as people come out and enjoy the green space. I'm committed to assist this Wi-Fi development by using my Reso A money and ensuring that we can invest our capital dollars in Wi-Fi projects. Funding, we believe is imperative that we implement a percent for parks funding model, which will commit 1% of the city budget to New York City parks. If we use the current preliminary budget as a baseline, this would increase the parks budget by approximately $385 million over the existing $501 million in the current allocation. That deserves a hand clap. And with that, with that type of investment, we could expand Wi-Fi. We could hire more partnerships for park staff. We could repair, expand drinking fountain access. We can repair and expand access to comfort stations, which is so important. And funding can also be used to improve existing parks and really think outside the box and think about how do we build more parks, typically like the initiative that was started in Borough Hall under Deputy Borough President Diana Rayner, the BQ Green across the BQE Expressway. We also want to use our ULERP process to expand. How do we use ULERP to expand the whole park initiative? So we will be submitting testimony to the committee, to the Parks Committee, which include recommendations included in this report with an emphasis on encourage New York City to adopt the percent for parks funding model. The timeliness of this parks report is so important because that capital hearing is going to take place in the next few days in the Committee on Parks, and we're going to introduce our report as well as testify on this hearing. So it's through our investment that we believe we can build a better park, and we will continue to feel that not only will a tree grow in Brooklyn, but trees will grow into our parks, communities will grow, relationships will grow. It's a great opportunity to encourage the growth of our parks. Green spaces play such a crucial role in the overall development of our families and our community, and this is one of the greatest investments we can make is to invest in our parks. Our parks are the pulse of our community, and by releasing the pulse of our parks reports, we're hoping that pulse continues to beat in a healthy fashion in the future. And so we want to bring on some of our partners to speak at this time. The first is Megan Douglas, Director of Communication in New York's Parks. And it's so important that this report has a great deal of information and research and detail on the number of parks that we have visited and participated in. So, Megan, we would love to hear from you at this time.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Megan Douglas. I'm the Director of Communications at New Yorkers for Parks. We are the citywide independent champion of quality open spaces for all New Yorkers. First, we want to thank Borough President Adams for his understanding of how essential quality, equitable parks and open spaces are to his constituents, and backing this up with real action. This report will help community members identify where their parks are and are not meeting their needs. And it will also help advocacy organizations such as New Yorkers for Parks strengthen our work on behalf of all residents. This kind of research and advocacy is at the heart of what we do. And so we want to invite community members to join us and Borough President Adams' office at our Brooklyn Borough by Borough meeting on Monday, April 16th, 6:30 p.m. at Borough Hall. At this meeting, we're going to support the exact kind of community engagement that this report recommends. And together with the expertise of the attendees and the community members in the room, we will identify action steps that we can all take to bring about positive change for parks in Brooklyn. We look forward to working with all Brooklynites, with the Borough President, and we thank him again for demonstrating his commitment to quality parks. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Megan. And our next speaker from Open Space Alliance, we also joined by Lasores, who's also with us as well, and so now Joy Mayock.
Thank you, President Adams. Again, my name is Joe Mayock. I'm the Executive Director of Open Space Alliance for North Brooklyn. We're the Park Conservancy for 45 parks and playgrounds in the neighborhoods of Greenpoint and Williamsburg. And we are very grateful to President Adams for fighting for better and more open space. He helped lead the fight for an expanded Bushwick Inlet Park. He's, as you heard today, he's continued to lead the fight for the funding and construction of BQ Green, also in Williamsburg. So, President Adams, thanks for 1%. That's an important number. Right now, the City Council is only spending half of 1% of its budget on parks. So the New York City Parks Department is doing a tremendous job, but they're faced with underinvestment and disinvestment. Over decades, the City Council has been lowering its commitment to parks, and I'm so grateful for President Adams, and our community is so grateful to essentially double the city's investment to 1%. So one thing I want to say, that I was on a conference call today with a number of city advocates, and a gentleman from the Bronx asked, why is it that parks are a driver of economic development in Manhattan and in Brooklyn? Why isn't it that parks are a driver of economic development throughout all 5 boroughs? So I feel like President Adams and his staff and everyone behind us is helping make sure that all parks, all citizens have safe, well-kept, well-programmed parks. Thank you, President Adams.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm calling you Joy, huh? You bring joy to us. And Joe is correct. When you look at the 270 parks that were in this report, it shows the life around our parks and how important our parks are and how much it brings people together. And I think nowhere personifies that more than one of Brooklyn Jews is Prospect Park. And we're here joined by Sue Donahue from Prospect Parks Alliance. Sue?
Thank you, Borough President Adams. I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon and to be celebrating and recognizing the importance of public parks. It's not surprising at all to me that the Borough President has issued this report and that it's called the Pulse of Our Parks. That pulse runs through this Borough President and through his office, and his commitment and support for public parks has been so clear and always in the forefront. And he recognizes the importance that public parks play in the life and the vitality of a city. We know that in Prospect Park, we call it Brooklyn's backyard, but green space and open space is so important throughout the 5 boroughs. And so we've been so fortunate. Prospect Park's history is one that the Borough President just talked about. It was community members, it was neighbors coming together and saying, we need to take back this park, we need to fight for this park, we need to fight for resources for this park. And it is that combination of the public and the public sector working with community groups that allows parks like Prospect Park and parks all across the city to thrive. So I'm so pleased to be here, and also want to recognize New Yorkers for Parks and compliment New Yorkers for Parks for the work that they do. We need advocacy. The way that things get done is that we need communities coming together and advocating for what's important to our lives as citizens, and New Yorkers for Parks plays that role, and it's so important to bring people together around this issue. So thank you so much for having me here today. I know so clearly the important role that parks play in people's lives, and I'm so happy to be part of this report and celebration highlighting that, the importance to the city. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I think, and just before we answer any questions, I think Joe's emphasis on the percent for parks funding is so important. A 50% increase in that funding will be a 100% increase in participation and a lifeline for many of our parks that are really holding on. We can do better by ensuring that we infuse more green dollars to improve our green space and create an environment for people to have access to great parks to raise healthy children and families. Open for any questions if you have at this time.
Yeah, could you first explain, I know you did in some detail, but I want to understand, the criteria for the parks that you surveyed, was it at least half an acre or just an acre? What was the?
At least half an acre.
So everything that was at least half an acre or larger
Yes.
is in here.
Mhm.
Okay. And the 1% has been tried at least once, if not twice, in the past. There was a big campaign back in 2001, and I think even more recently. What do you think can be done this time around? Since, as you mentioned, over the years, funding has really moved away from the Parks Department. Now there's more dependence on city council members to fund parks, way more than there used to be. So what can be done? How can the message be different this year?
I think there's a connection with all of the groups. Having safe green spaces also ties into Vision Zero. It ties into those of us who are advocating for the use of bikes. It ties into the anti-violence model by creating places where people can come together. It ties into the increase in hate crime. Too many people are existing in silos, holding events in our parks. We encourage people to come together. So we have to stop looking at our parks as a luxury that is a separate entity from the overall development of the borough and the city, particularly here in the borough of Brooklyn. And so by encouraging greater green spaces, it encourages people to stop living in their own silos and come out and interact with other groups. And you're going to see a more harmonious climate that's created by doing so. So it's a larger picture that we're looking at, and now we want to get all of these advocates for those different issues to come together and see that there's one common denominator, and that's great green spaces. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you all. Great,